So, oftentimes with our podcast, we tend to obviously focus on diseases and really how to prevent them. And really, the number one cause of death in America is heart disease. So, today we're going to speak a little deeper into that, but speak on in particular food that may actually protect your heart. But this is a food that doesn't do but so much by itself. It needs team players. And that food, once again, ladies and gentlemen, is pomegranate. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to yet another Brewer Report. As always, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this podcast. And as always, we are talking about health. That can be a touchy subject. So always consult with your doctors or your medical advisors if you're ever partaking in a new diet or a new fitness program. We are simply researchers. So you can take this information and share it with your doctor and definitely make the best choices for you and your system and your body. So today, like I said at the top, we're talking about pomegranate and we're talking about it as it relates to our cardiovascular health. I want to share my screen because just recently, this actor, Patrick Muldoon, I remember I saw this news and I was like, I know this guy. He was an actor who played on the popular soap Days of Our Lives. He just recently passed away. He passed away of a heart attack. He was born in 1968, so, he wasn't that old, but he passed away from a heart attack in his Beverly Hills home. So I don't want to, I don't know what his medical history was. My heart goes out to his family and his friends. It's tragic what happened to him. But also, my dad was telling me about Christopher Kid Reed. I grew up with Kid and Play. I did hear Kid's story recently, and my dad just recently saw it on CNN, but he was talking about recently getting a heart transplant because he was experiencing literally heart failure. So, and again, I think what his age is 62. Again, not too old. So heart disease is a major problem in our country. And today we're going to talk about foods that may be able to help protect your heart. So let's get into it. Pomegranate and cardiovascular health. So, as we said at the top, pomegranate is a protector. The power of a team player, though, it needs teammates. So let's get into it, Daddy.
Yeah, Pomegranate is the ultimate team player. I like to use an NBA and WNBA analogy. Pomegranate is the assist leader, if you will, for foods. In other words, it is in there to assist other foods in terms of providing those scoring as they do in the NBA. That assist leader is the one that feeds the shooter. John Stockton, the greatest assist leader of all time in the NBA with over 15,000 assists. Sue Bird, the greatest assist leader in the WNBA. And they basically were, obviously Hall of Famers. And so this is the Pomegranate is a Hall of Famer, is a Hall of Famer when it comes to your health and assist leading. In other words, it works with other shooters, if you will, other foods that will basically help you with your health. And today we'll talk about cardiovascular disease. And so you will see some of those shooters, if you will, and some of those other foods that pomegranate actually works with, in combination with, and assists in also getting your health better.
And we're going to get into those foods more specifically a little later in the show. But let's get into the four drivers of cardiovascular disease.
Absolutely. High blood pressure, high blood pressure, high blood pressure. I mean, you can't get around that. When you have high blood pressure, you have problems. I mean, it causes all kinds of disease problems with you. And of course, the oxidative stress, okay? Oxidative stress, and you can see how you can see on the dials down there just how critical each one of them becomes. Of course, inflammation is another one. And what drives all this? A poor diet. So when you have oxidative stress, in other words, your arteries are stressed. your heart is working overtime. And then you add into that inflammation. Okay. That's where you get all of this pain, etc., in your system. And then of course you have your poor diet. And it's a deadly combination. It's a tough combination.
And so today we're going to talk about the solutions. And let's start with the shift from superfoods to systems. Is this superfood good for your heart? We're talking about pomegranate. Where does this food fit in this system? As my dad mentioned, it needs team players. It's a great assist when it comes to pomegranate. So let's get into first the anatomy of damage. Open vessel, smooth lining, strong blood flow, but then plaque builds up. As my dad mentioned, oxidative stress, it reduces your flow. So, again, let's get into the solutions. The anchor, pomegranate's clinical profile.
Right. Pomegranate basically on its own now can decrease blood pressure, but it doesn't sustain that. You need some other foods to go with it. It decreases oxidative stress, and that's that constriction inside of your blood vessels. And of course, it is a artery defense. In other words, it protects blood vessels from structural damage. There are studies to show that when it is combined with other foods, it keeps your arteries strong and resilient, and that endothelial lining in your arteries intact.
Yes. And let's dig deeper into the protector mechanism. You see pomegranate there in the middle. As my dad said, it does help with all these different things, but let's get more into the specifics about why it's more of the protector.
Right. Now we talked about this earlier in one of our in the podcast where we dealt with nitric oxide, and we showed that while you get arugula and beets that are produced, these are high nitrate veggies that are really pumping that nitric oxide into your system. But what happens is that nitric oxide will dissipate fairly quickly if you don't combine it with pomegranates and pomegranate juice or seeds. And so what happens is it sustains that nitric oxide. And I think when you look back at that chart, it sustains it for 3 to 6 hours. So in essence, that's great for you when you're going to work and you have some major uh, presentation or things you got to do. If you're an athlete, you're going to go out and compete. You eat some pomegranate seeds along with, and we put ours in a smoothie, along with beets and arugula, etc. And boy, you get that big pump. And we're going to also talk about some other things. But also, pomegranate also combines to get rid of that oxidative stress that's caused by LDL cholesterol. So it reduces that LDL cholesterol in your system. Okay. And the ultimate goal there is once you get rid of that LDL cholesterol, then you start to shield your artery lining. In other words, you create a better cardiovascular system, if you will.
Right. And we see that mentioned here shields artery lining. And so the missing variables, again, as we said before, does it help with nitric oxide or lowering blood pressure and all these different things? Yes. But it's just not the strongest by itself. It needs a team. Pomegranate is an elite protector, or as my dad said, a elite assist. Is that what it's called in basketball?
Yes.
Assist,
Yes,
assist.
yeah, they're the assist leader in foods. They're one of the assist leaders. I'm not going to say the only one, but they're one of the assist leaders in food. So when you think about pomegranates, you think about John Stockton. I mean, he blew it away with 15,000 plus assists, and the number two was Chris Paul at about 12,000. So
So pomegranate will get
it's
a
just
Hall of Fame.
yeah, pomegranates in the Hall of Fame when it comes to assisting other foods and protecting your health.
Okay. So now let's get into those particular foods. We've been speaking about these team players. Let's dive deeper into who these team players are. And honestly, it's off foods that you probably consume often, or at least most of them. Let's start with garlic.
Yeah, now that seems like a kind of strange bedfellows, but garlic and pomegranates, especially we're going to get deeper into this, pomegranate seeds, it really reverses high blood pressure, period. Okay. It reverses high blood pressure. It is a great combination. There is a study on it that talks about it. Uh, and of course, we've already talked about the nitric oxide and opening up those arteries with beets and arugula. Of course, arugula is one of our favorite vegetables because it's very high in nitrates and one of the highest nitric oxide foods. So when you combine that with pomegranate and pomegranate seeds, you basically open up your arteries and basically get a tremendous amount, a lot of blood flow, which means that nitric oxide also gives you more energy. And of course, as we've already said, that pomegranate protects your arteries, reversing oxidative stress so that you protect that arterial lining in your arteries. And of course, one of my go-to foods every day is turmeric. If you combine pomegranate with turmeric, now you're starting to reduce inflammation. So we've got a couple of recipes here that you can combine these things because as I said, I'll be 80 years old here in May, God willing. And so one of the things that I contend with and people my age is arthritis. Arthur is undefeated. So I basically will add pomegranate with my turmeric to make sure that I reduce inflammation in my system.
And let me circle back a little bit to the beets. I believe I heard you say you could also eat arugula. So it's really like any food that is good with nitric oxide, right? It doesn't have to be beets
Absolutely.
and pomegranate. Okay,
It
good.
doesn't have to be beets. It can be arugula. In fact, arugula is my go-to. I love arugula. And so you're getting two things when you get arugula. You're also getting not only the nitric oxide, but you're getting the green. You're getting that green again, that part of G bombs: greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds. And within the onion category, you're also talking about garlic. So the arugula gives you the best of both worlds. In fact, beet greens. If you steam your beet greens, you get even more nitric oxide. So beets with beet greens, but you got to steam your beet greens. You don't just eat them straight up. But and also, my combination is beets, beet greens, and arugula plus pomegranate and pomegranate seeds.
So have a great big arugula salad with some kale
Yeah,
and a side of well, we would say maybe some pomegranate seeds along with juice, or a little later we'll share again my dad's smoothie recipe, which we also have on our page. You can check it out via our playlist, The Brewers in the Kitchen, and I'll be sure to also link it in the video. Okay, so synergy in action. Let's dig a little deeper into the garlic, just as an example of how pomegranate works with its teammates. And we'll also speak again on the other foods again. But let's get into garlic a little bit.
so garlic is I'm not trying to get into your love life here, but
Yeah, garlic in the pores is like,
yeah,
like
yeah,
the smell of garlic in pores is not
right. I'm not
good.
gonna get into your love life, but garlic is really good for you. Okay, it helps lower that blood pressure, and then when you add some pomegranate and pomegranate seeds, especially, it has an additive effect. In other words, it has a synergistic effect, and so that really gets deep into lowering your blood pressure. And there's a significant study on that down below, as you see, the slow beat trial from 2025 that basically talked about how it lowered systolic and diastolic blood pressure. Okay, so that these are studies. We don't give you hype. This is studies. And of course, nitric oxide, it boosts nitric oxide. Garlic also produces a boost nitric oxide. And of course, the pomegranate protects it. So you sustain it. It goes back to what I said about 3 to 6 hours. So it sustains it. So if you had that beets and arugula, et cetera, along with garlic, et cetera, you're going to have sustain. And then, of course, oxidative stress, you want to protect your arteries and you want to protect your heart. And so it is when you combine these two, you basically are amplifying that protection.
And as you can see from the chart, pomegranate seems to be quite strong with the oxidative stress. But again, pair it with something to amplify it.
Right.
So, the top five cardiovascular stacks, top five teammates, if you will. We already talked about garlic just now. So, let's move to beets again, or you could maybe do arugula. As it says here, helps with your blood flow. It amplifies it or protects your nitric oxide, supports it better so it stays in your system longer.
Right.
Tier three, inflammation, pomegranate and turmeric. Best for inflammation when you pair it together. Now,
Right.
let's
So
get
that's
into
extremely important to understand that. Yeah, go ahead.
let's get into tier four. This is something a little new, pomegranate and cocoa or cacao.
Right. This really gets deep because what happens is it has flavonols and polyphenols, which has some antioxidant capabilities. But this is where things get really interesting because it also helps with blood flow and sustaining your blood flow over time. And the studies that we have seen so far, and we're going to get into the SEX world, that it will help you with
Via
your love life.
just real quick, the studies are from NIH, quite reputable,
Right.
in
Right.
Loma,
And Loma
correct?
Linda, and
Yeah.
Loma Linda University. These are studies from NIH and Loma Linda that basically show that it also helps you with your love life. Okay. So if you combine pomegranate with cacao, and I would add that if you combine pomegranate with cocoa or cacao, and oh, by the way, if you're doing cocoa, it has to be 70% dark chocolate or higher. Okay. And it's best with seeds, not juice. It's pomegranate seeds plus cocoa 70% or higher or cacao. Okay.
You want that
Seeds.
fiber. You want that fiber.
Right. You want that fiber. Okay. Not the juice, but the seeds. So you gotta what is recommended is you melt that dark chocolate and you throw in some pomegranate seeds. Now you're getting the flavonols and the polyphenols and that increased blood flow in terms of your overall sexual health. But if it's good for your sex life, it's good for your heart. Okay, so that's how I always put it. If it's good for your sex life, it's good for your heart.
And that's the key that men in particular and women need to understand. Like, a lot of folks focus on the sex part of it, but if you are having trouble there, that could be an indication that you have a bigger issue, and that's your heart, your circulation issue. So really pay attention to this. It's all about your health. It's not, oh, I'm just getting older, or this is just what happens, but no, it's an indication that you may have a circulation problem, a heart issue. Now, tier five, emerging, pomegranate and dates.
Yeah, this has potential. It has not been sorted out yet. It has worked well with mice, and it's not pomegranates and just dates. It's pomegranate and date seeds. That's what the study is looking at right now. Now, obviously, you have to grind what they call bake and grind the seeds and mix it with the pomegranates. And that's a little bit of and when I saw this study, I immediately asked the question. I said, "Isn't this somewhat of a gastro challenge, if you will, if you did that?" But in essence, that is future and potential. And as soon as this breaks, as soon as this goes to human trials, we will introduce it. But it has anti-atherosclerosis. In other words, it will basically keep you from having hardening of the arteries. And so, in essence, this is promising, but it's not quite there yet.
Yes, and as we always say with science, things are evolving, and we discover new things because of all these different studies. So the Brewer Synergy smoothie, as I said, you can see my dad making this smoothie. Look to our playlist, The Brewers in the Kitchen, and you'll see him actually making the smoothie and also uh, explaining the benefits of each ingredient. But let's get into it here.
Right. So the pomegranate juice, I use the juice as a base, but I have a heck of a lot of seeds in it because the pomegranate juice is going to give you that antioxidant uh, boost, if you will, but it doesn't sustain it. Okay, it gives you that nitric oxide boost, but it doesn't sustain it. So protects the nitric oxide, but it doesn't sustain it. What sustains it is the seeds. Then the flow boosters again. beets. It's optional for blood flow. But my thing is I'm going to add beets and arugula. Okay. That's the great combination. Turmeric is anti-inflammatory, but in order to get to the curcumin in the turmeric, you have to add turmeric, you have to add black pepper and extra virgin olive oil, and you create a paste. I use a turmeric paste that I keep in my refrigerator, and I basically add that to the various foods. I add it to my salad dressing, my balsamic salad dressing, when I'm eating all of my kale and arugula and carrots and et cetera, purple cabbage and onions, et cetera, salad. And then, of course, broccoli sprouts are the ultimate in terms of antioxidants, in terms of foods. It is extremely high in the antioxidant sulforaphane, and the reason you see mustard seed powder down there is you actually add the mustard seed powder to the broccoli sprouts in order to boost the sulforaphane in the broccoli sprouts. And of course, flax seeds are omega-3, and it also adds fiber. So this is a super smoothie, to be honest with you. And now what you can do is add some cacao, some chocolate, and really take it to another level.
Yeah, and make that, as my dad often calls his smoothies, super smoothies for sure.
We'll do a short on that.
Okay, great. And now, as always, safety and clinical caution. As we always say, talk to your doctors, consult your doctor if you take, in particular, these particular medications. Obviously, these are blood thinner type of medications and also blood pressure type of medications. You must be careful.
Absolutely, because you don't want to go out of sight low in terms of your blood pressure, and you don't want to basically have your blood too thin. So you always, and I mean always, consult with your doctor before you start adding these types of foods. And I mean, this is a transition, yo. You really need to transition to this diet, okay? The G Bombs diet: greens, beans, onions, garlic, mushrooms, berries, seeds, and nuts. And obviously now we're going to be talking about all of these spices, turmeric, etc., as well as the nuts. Nuts are extremely important. But in other words, you need to transition to these types of foods because, as we said, the number one cause of death in America is cardiovascular disease. And Stacey highlighted a couple of people who are, frankly speaking, late 50s and early 60s who had passed. The one in the early 60s just had a heart transplant, and the one in the late 50s just passed. So it's real. It's real.
And it doesn't matter, disease, heart disease doesn't care about your economic status. So, I'm not trying to make it about money, but, sometimes people may think they're protected because they may have access to certain things. But it's really, it's down to the diet and your lifestyle.
Right. Right. You can't out eat your money. Okay.
Right.
Can't out eat your money. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can have a heart attack in your mansion or in your small apartment.
Doesn't matter.
Either way, consume the G Bombs diet wherever you are. So, the final takeaway is that pomegranate doesn't do everything, but it protects everything. Power isn't
Right.
the food, it's the combination.
Absolutely. Again, pomegranate is the John Stockton in terms of assists, and Sue Bird in terms of assists. It makes everything else it makes all the other foods better in terms of the team. In other words, it helps the other foods score. Just as John Stockton and Sue Bird helped all those great scorers like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and LeBron James and all of those other folks, they helped them score. Okay, it helped them score. So that's what pomegranate does. It helps those other foods score in your system.
And that's a great way to end this podcast. Pomegranate, that's your protector. It helps the other foods score, as my dad just said. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, all that great stuff. Just get us into the YouTube streets or into all of the podcast streets, wherever you're listening to us or watching us. Be sure to engage, etc. We have a lot of exciting new things coming that we'll talk more on later. But thank you once again for watching, and hopefully, you learn something new and will apply some of this to your diet, of course, after you consult with your doctors. All righty, that's our show for today. Peace.